Okay, we are apparently live. It doesn't matter that we're live, Hidek, because like nobody watches this. It's fine. Haha. Basically, this is just my excuse to like chat with my friends that I've never seen for 1,000 years. It's like, oh, it's a meetup. Well, that's secondary.
Yes, do you organize this for yourself?
Yeah, of course. Myself
Yeah.
and my friends.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to listen to my crappy conversations, go ahead. I'm not stopping you. Haha. Anywho, how have you been? We had the last time we saw each other was probably Frontiers, right? So that's like almost like exactly a year ago, no?
Yeah, that's a year ago. Yeah, and it's been such a year. Amazing.
Yeah, it's been a nuts year, I would say.
We would have met again probably at CSS Day.
Yeah.
In May or something. Yeah.
I think it was June. I was thinking June, but
June. Yeah, June. Yeah.
Peter sent out the communications around like April, May, and they're like, nah, we're going to next year. So I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So have you been doing like online talks for the most of this year?
A bit, yeah. It's been like I planned in March to go to a conference, and from then I thought like the next conference will be physical. That was what we still thought in March. But then at some point it was just like, nah, probably gonna have a year of online stuff. Yeah, mostly telemetry stuff. So talks about authoring tools, accessibility, CMSs and things. So
Yeah.
it's related. I'm excited to be talking about CSS again because that's more of my passion than CMSs, even more.
Oh, but I really like your accessibility stuff. Like between you, Manuel, Viennese Mafia, Manuel, Leonie, Adrian, right? Like that's like the bulk of my accessibility. Like
behind me because
that's
I
really
put them on
nice.
my laptop before, and I don't really take my laptop anywhere now. So I thought I'll put it on the wall.
Yeah, that's smart because that people see that and people don't see your laptop.
Exactly. Yeah.
Excellent.
If I'm gonna be online,
Excellent
I've gotta
idea.
put my sticker somewhere, right? So yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, my other speaker is clearly is either not here or am I not letting him in? Oh dear, I'm not very good at this. Nah, okay. I guess we can just go first after I'm done with the like the rubbish news section. Then I guess
Did anything happen in CSS this week? Is it week, month? Probably.
this month I would say from the working group side, it's just regular meetings. No actual spec publications this month, surprisingly. But quite a lot of browser news. Like Chrome's finally shipped the Grid Inspector, and it's great. It's great. Like I think they're almost feature parity with Firefox, which is great because then people don't have to relearn an interface. Like they have the layout panel, they have the line number toggles and stuff that is like kind of familiar already. So I thought that was really nice. Probably gonna touch on that for a bit. And because it's a 5-week cycle, I have like a truckload of links and code pens. There was something that came out of Igalia, I think a week ago, because I think Igalia also helps WebKit with their implementation, right?
Yeah.
So I think they've more or less like caught up to. I'm not sure if they are fully matched up with Firefox and Chrome, but like I think they shipped quite a few like Flexbox cross-browser things. So that's nice. I think they included that in the link. Oh, by the way, do you have is there a public link to your slides that you're using?
Oh yeah. Yes. Do you want it?
I just need for the newsletter that no one reads. Haha.
Wait, there's a newsletter?
Oh yeah. But the newsletter is basically just everything that I cover in this. If you can see my screen, right? Yeah. Plus a link to the videos and your slides. So that's
Cool.
what it is.
Okay. But I have put it in this chat. I don't know if that's the best place.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, we've got like
your blog is in it.
What?
Your blog is.
Oh, hey. Thanks for the shout out. Appreciate it. Yeah, I'll just start things at 7, a couple of minutes, no problem. It's not a conference, which is great. Because the last time,
It's
okay,
relaxed.
I did the last conference that I did was for FranConf,
Okay.
the Moscow one. That was it was really nice. I think the applications that they use, I'm pretty sure they're Russian because the interface was in Russian. But the concept of they have like a hallway simulated hallway was very interesting. I think it was probably built in Canva. I didn't bother to go and inspect, but like you could kind of log into this chat and you just like move to areas on the canvas and then so I'll be talking to I think they're the main host and then there are a few of their community folks helping out and the Q&A was like just there and it was really nice. I thought it was interesting. Yeah, but they were very good and professional about the whole video thing. So like this, what you see right now, like the light behind my head, that's a no. So I was actually facing
Yeah.
that green wall. So I sat on my bed because that's my bed. I was sat on my
Okay.
bed for
Yeah.
the whole time. But
Yeah.
it came out nice because the wall is like green and like clean.
Yeah.
Like none of that professionalism from us. We do not believe in
I had one
professionalism.
of those for a conference that they comment the technical person will check and then they'll say like do you have a wired connection and stuff like that.
Yeah.
If they
And
like to do
I think
that.
that's great because like they are running like a proper conference style
Yeah.
thing.
It makes sense.
Yeah, a lot of people have been like trying to figure this conference thing out.
Yeah.
Most of us
Speaking
just
of which,
like
we're
just
figuring the TPAC
cancel.
out in a few weeks. Are you gonna join any of that? Because there will be some open sessions at TPAC in a few weeks.
Yeah, TPAC. I'm what I'm wondering if so I think we have the CL guys. I'm wondering if they're gonna show up. But like I think I'm gonna be. I don't know if it's part of TPAC or not. But Greg Whitworth, he's doing
Yeah.
the open UI stuff.
Yes.
I'm gonna try to get into that. I don't know it's part of TPAC or not. Cause the emails came out at the same time.
Right. It might be.
But yeah, no, I
It might
should
be. I think
actually
it's
do
part
look
of
at the.
WICG, which I think is a community group,
Yeah,
which is a
yeah,
thing
yeah,
they
yeah, yeah,
invent
yeah,
to,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, so I can circumvent the weird W3C
Yeah,
process
no,
stuff.
actually, I haven't registered yet. I should go and look at it like soon. Oh dear. But thanks for
There's a
reminding me.
CSS and accessibility thing that I'll probably try to
Hello,
join.
hello. Yay,
Hello,
more human beings in
Oh,
this
hello.
more
chat.
human beings from the Netherlands.
Yes,
No!
yes.
Amazing.
Going international. We love our European friends. The Americans are probably asleep, so it's fine.
Yeah, it's actually a really good time for Europeans, like 1 p.m.
It's like lunchtime for y'all, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm gonna just start off my standard intro. So hello. For people who are not part of the organizing committee in this Zoom chat, and like God knows how many people are watching on YouTube, probably zero. Welcome to the 55th edition of Talk.CSS, month of October. It was a very long month cycle. It's like a 5-week cycle, so it probably felt as if we weren't operational. But if you look at the calendar, we are actually the first Wednesday of October is today. So yes, we are Singapore CSS. We have a Twitter account. We use the hashtag TalkCSS, but honestly, nobody uses the hashtag TalkCSS except us. So that's that. If you want to do some social twittering, we have a website and it's not changed since we set it up for the past 5 years. Still there, recaps of past meetups and videos and like speaker profiles, etc. We have a newsletter, which is essentially just an email version of the HTML and CSS news for the month thing that I do. I force you all to sit through. I'm forcing you all to sit through now. We have a code of conduct. We do not tolerate harassment of participants of any kind because this is a Zoom meeting. We can kick you out, but like I know y'all, so like this is, you know, standard protocol. Be nice to everybody, say nice things. Moving on. Shout outs. We have to shout out engineers.sg. You can see the same E logo on the Zoom call, or maybe you don't see it on the Zoom call. Engineers.sg, premier team of volunteer videographers who, when we were doing in-person meetups, they physically showed up at the meetup to take videos and post them onto the engineers.sg YouTube channel. 14K subscribers, doing well, ding, ding, ding. We also want to shout out Chion. Chion probably not watching, but we still shout him out anyway. Unofficially known as the Swag King of Singapore. If you are based in Singapore or maybe Southeast Asia and you have an event or company, whatever, and you need to get swag printed, he will give you premier advice. The man wrote a 5,000 word essay on how to, you know, get your swag done, vendors, options, and things like that. Anyway, Swag King of Singapore, he also printed the first batch of Singapore CSS stickers and thus has immortalized him in our Talk.CSS slides here and forever. We have friends, because meetups have friends. Our sister meetup is Singapore JS. They usually happen middle of the month, so you can check on their GitHub whether they have anything scheduled for later this month. React Knowledgeable is another best friend meetup of ours. They have recently changed their format, and perhaps they might redo the public stuff eventually. But in the meantime, please do subscribe to their YouTube channel. I will talk about this a bit later. Post of the month, again, interwebs, because we are all sitting at home right now. So Talk.CSS is brought to you courtesy of the internet and the World Wide Web, without which none of this would be possible. Moving on. CSS color of the month. Haha, this is like my favorite section. The only section that I really care about. No, I'm just kidding. I care about the speakers. So there are 148 named CSS colors available for use if you want to declare colors in your websites and you do not enjoy the use of hex codes or RGBA, you can actually use English words. Just keep in mind that the color names have no spaces, no tabs, no underscores. They are like just squished together, one word, even though they are like separate words. This month's color of the month is yellow green. Now, yellow green is actually more interesting than it sounds. It's like a yellowish green, right? First off, there is actually nothing specifically dedicated to yellow green because the name itself is self-explanatory. It's color between yellow and green. But then Google is a rabbit hole. So if you try to like dig a bit more into this name yellow green, it is apparently a dull medium shade of chartreuse. Now I'm pronouncing it wrong because I think it's a French name for some liquor. Chartreuse is a CSS color which we covered in Talk.CSS 15, 40 editions ago. So, you know, go figure. But anyway, CSS color of the month, yellow green. Moving on. This is the agenda. I have 2 speakers today. But first, I must make all of you sit through this. HTML and CSS news for this month. So it's been a long cycle. So a bit lengthy on the links side, but never mind. Let's just cover some of the more interesting things from the browser side. And let's see. What do we have? Okay. Let's talk about this. So Safari Technology Preview, in case you didn't know, it's kind of like the like Nightly or Canary equivalent, but for Safari. And it's really very nice. It's very cool because the team does a 2-week, about 2-week, I think, release cycle. And they put in a lot of new stuff. And whatever that goes into the technology preview will ship when it's stable. Now, unfortunately, they are still tied to the OS releases, But like if you want to try out a lot of the newer CSS properties, actually Safari TP can be your go-to browser for that. So they have they push out a lot of other stuff. I only highlight the HTML and or CSS related things. Oh, this one's quite interesting because it's like a piece of trivia, just in case people don't know. So font weight, right? It's a CSS property, yes, but it is also a font descriptor if you use it in the add font face rule, right? So it says here reject bolder and lighter because bolder and lighter, these are legitimate values as a CSS property. But when you use it as a font weight descriptor, actually they are no, like you're not supposed to use them. So Safari actually fixed it. I think they recognized it earlier, but according to the spec, it's not. So they finally fixed that. But I think this is an interesting piece of trivia for those people who never knew you could use lighter and bolder to begin with, and people who didn't realize that it's not legit as a font descriptor. Ding, ding, ding. They fixed the CSS specificity of something called a host pseudo class. No worries if you never heard of it before, because this is a shadow DOM thing. Just for explanation's sake, this host pseudo class allows you to select a custom element from inside its shadow DOM. So not relevant if you're not using Shadow DOM at all. But there has been an interesting read that was published on web.dev recently on an experimental feature called declarative shadow root. So if you're interested, you can look. It's quite comprehensive. I believe, I guess since it's experimental, it's probably Chrome only, but it lets you use the shadow DOM on the server side. So kind of trying to achieve server side rendering. So that's pretty interesting if that's something that's up your alley. Closing the gap in Flexbox. Okay, this one I always like to mention, especially for people who are not familiar. There's this company called Igalia who does a lot of the implementation of specs and features for different browsers. So they also do work for WebKit. They do work. They were the people who did the grid implementation for Chrome, for Blink, right? So they've been pushing like fixes and stuff for WebKit. So that would be great. So it's kind of gonna like reduce the number of cross-browser issues with Flexbox moving forward. So I think that's great news. We can talk about, so now like the updates for Chrome and Chrome DevTools are more stable now that they've hired a proper developer advocate for DevTools. I will still continue to shout out this individual because she's Malaysian. Yes. So yeah, she wrote the article for it. So in terms of CSS updates in Chrome 86, latest newer stable, more options for the marker pseudo element. So this is fun if you want to do customized lists. On the DevTools side, this is the biggest announcement that we have. DevTools 87. Chrome finally has a grid inspector. Like, you all should be celebrating, everybody. They have, I think, almost feature parity with Firefox, I would say. So if you're already used to Firefox DevTools, nothing to unlearn or relearn, very similar. There's a layout pane.
Daarmee naast leuke dingen te doen.
What's happening? And so, yeah, if you wanna like check it out early, I don't know. Is it in stable? Someone who uses stable can tell me because I use Canary. So it's already there. There's a CSS overview panel that I tried to share with everybody the last time, but it didn't work. But I think I can show people now. So because there's so much stuff in DevTools, I always suggest using the Command Shift P thing to find this. So there's this like CSS panel, overview panel. So it'll show you this like the overview of the CSS in your on your page, and then you can see colors, font info, news declarations, media queries, good stuff. So worth install, I would say. What else? Okay, nothing much on specification land. Lots of articles. So, I mean, can take a look at this. Subscribe to our newsletter. Send this to your inbox. Wanted to show, yeah, this is very cool. And this is also very cool. And this is pretty cool. So, cool code pens, everybody. So, everybody's favorite single div artist, Lynn Fisher. I think she's doing like a div October thing. So, there are probably going to be like multiple things out of her. This hot sauce bottle single div. Amazing. This is not running, sadly. Never mind. Oh no, my browser's crashing. Oh shit. Okay, let's give it a few seconds. This pure CSS. Come on, this is amazing. So everybody go and follow Ricardo Oliva Alonso on CodePen. Last highlight is, as a Switch owner myself, I always enjoy pure CSS Nintendo switches. Something is off with CodePen, so maybe this looks weird, but like, yeah, look, pure CSS. So we're done. I'm gonna hand things over to my first speaker for the evening. Hida, do you want to share your screen? I will stop sharing now. Meanwhile, don't start yet. Don't start yet. No, actually you can start. Never mind. Yeah, anytime.
Hi, this is Hida, and I'm stoked to be at Singapore's Talk.CSS, an event that I've seen on the Twitters quite a lot, and you know, it's pretty cool to be part of that. I was in Singapore physically about 10 years ago, around this same time in October. And yeah, I'd love to be back at some time, but sadly this thing is going to be virtual. But that's fine. We're going to be virtual and we are going to be talking about something interesting, grid layout. And what I want to talk about specifically is what happens when you size things in grid layout. Because when I teach workshops, people are often surprised by how sizing works in grid layout and why things get as big or as small as they do. So with that, let's get started. I'm Hida, as I said. I am a freelance front-end developer and accessibility specialist from Rotterdam in the Netherlands. This is a photo of Rotterdam in much nicer weather than it is today. It's a bit rainy out. If you are in the Netherlands, please do visit. I also have a blog, which is on hida.blog, a new URL that I registered recently. And I'm on Twitter as well, as @HDV. Now, when we talk about designing things, we usually also have to talk a bit about the canvas we design on. And people who do print design, like Wim Crowell, who designed these beautiful posters, a Dutch print designer, he was assigned to do posters for things like museums. And he was asked, you know, do you want to do this poster? Then they would tell him what size the poster would be, or maybe he would ask whatever, but he would have a fixed canvas to work with. So he would know beforehand what his canvas would look like. And designers of that time and designers later on, they took advantage of that by designing grid systems that would specifically be based on a paper size. They would divide that paper size into boxes and cells and tracks, and with that create their beautiful designs. We have no such thing on the web. We don't have a fixed canvas. We don't have something like fixed paper sizes like A4 and P2. So we don't have these numbers standardized as much as maybe we would have liked to on the web. But still, we can do very exciting things with web technology. A supermarket near me, and I guess supermarkets around the world do this, now uses TV screens to advertise stuff instead of posters. So every once in a while they refresh it, like every week they'll have new things that are on special and they'll put them on these posters. And I think the general design of the posters, maybe the grid of the poster, will very much stay the same. But of course the pictures and the text is going to change. Now, this is something that marketeers on a marketing blog have explained and said it's going to be more relevant and more local outreach to their customers. That's marketing speech for, okay, we are very happy with our screens, but all I could think of when I saw that these things were going digital is that this could use some CSS. You could actually use CSS on screens just as well as you could write CSS for browsers. You can write CSS for screens, and maybe these posters could be made very reusably with some HTML and some CSS. But not the marketeers, they thought about outreach instead. That's fine. But I think these digital posters are one way that we could really take our web technology to different places. Because if we're honest, the web was designed on screens that looked a bit like this. This is Tim Berners-Lee next to the computer that presumably ran the first website. And what's interesting about this picture, I think, is that we still have the web. We can actually still even access that website. But we can do it on completely different devices from this one. None of our computers look like this anymore, yet we can still access that same web. We can access the web now on our fridge. We can have the web in our cars. We can have the web on our phones in the tube, or we could be somewhere at an office and use some fixed desktop computer, or we consider our couch. We could use it pretty much everywhere. The web is everywhere, and we have infinite canvases. Unlike the print designers who had these fixed canvases, which almost sounds a bit boring. We got to design for all of these different canvases. And on the web we have more things that are very varied, like languages that the web can be displayed in. And also with that, lots of different writing systems. So the web is a very exciting platform to be working for. Luckily, we have a language that is here to help. CSS is here to help because it knows that the web has all these languages and all these writing systems, and it can help us develop stuff for them. So I want to look a bit at terminology first, because the terminology is important to understand what sizes things get. First I want to talk about this distinction between block sizes and inline sizes. And that has to do with directions that they go into. So the block direction is the direction in which block elements go. So when we add a new paragraph to our page or an image that is a block element, that is the direction that new paragraphs would be placed in. So blocks go from top to bottom, and inline elements go from left to right. In a line. So each word that is added to a page is added in the inline direction, in this case from left to right. But I'm saying in this case because this is only the case if we use left to right and top to bottom layout, which has long been a default on the web. But in recent times, CSS has kind of been adapted to work with different kinds of layouts. So there is the writing modes module that looks at all these different writing systems. So we have the Latin-based writing system that was for a long time the default on the web. So text goes from left to right and block elements go from top to bottom. But as the writing mode specification explains, there are more writing systems out there. There is the Mongolian-based writing system that has the blocks flow from left to right and inline going from top to bottom. Then there are Han-based systems like Chinese, which can have their block direction from top to bottom and then the inline direction from left to right. Or it can have the block direction from right to left and the inline direction from top to bottom. And then there's Arabic systems where the inline direction is from right to left and the block direction is from top to bottom. And there's all these different writing systems, and it would be really cool if the web automatically adapted for that. And there is CSS invented for that, and a great primer on that is Wei Jing's post, Vertical Typesetting with Writing Mode Revisited, where she looks at an older example that she created, and then opens it again. She goes from frowny face to scared face to angry face to disappointed face in just 5 minutes. In this post, she explains kind of some stuff that she encounters when she tries to use writing modes on the web. But one conclusion I drew from this is that vertical type on the web is still quite tricky to get right. I quote, "Unfortunately, 10 minutes into the attempt, I broke my brain." So this means something. If Weijing breaks her brain, I'm sure many others will as well. So at this point, not all of writing modes will work as easily as you might expect, especially if you're trying to use pictures and things that are not text. But that's fine, because trying to work with writing modes and understanding writing modes is still very useful. If you want to understand CSS Grid and Flexbox, as Jan Simmons explains in her post, CSS writing modes on 24 ways. If you understand that these writing modes have different directions, and that we have this block direction and inline direction, and it can vary between different writing modes, all of a sudden it makes a lot more sense that we have things like align self start or align self end rather than left or right or top or bottom. So these writing modes, they are useful in order to understand how things like alignment work in CSS Grid Layout or Flexbox. Now writing modes, they can be set in CSS as a property, so there's writing mode property, and then you can use the values horizontal TP, which is top to bottom, vertical RL, vertical right to left, vertical left to right, and then there's two properties for sideways, and are kind of meant for interesting creative typographic effects, not so much for specific languages. So let's look at sizing now. And for that I want to look at three different sizes. First the grid container, then grid tracks, and then at last I want to look at grid items, so how big they can all become. So we'll start with the grid container. You can create a grid container by setting display grid on any element, any old div or section. Then if you put that onto a page, just a section element, which is a block element, it's going to take all of the size of the window. It's containing element basically. Then if we put a div in there with display grid, it is going to take that exact same size, because it takes the containing element size, which in this case is that section that took the size of the window. So that div is just going to take that same size. It's going to take it from its containing element. If we set a width to the section, then the div inside of that grid is also going to have that same width. So we've set it to 500 pixels, and that div is also going to have the 500 pixels. So the grid is going to be as big as its containing element. Now, what we could do is set a float to that div element, but if we do that, we will find that its size is completely gone. We can no longer see it. The same happens when we set position absolute to that element. And what's going on here is that when you use either floats or position absolute, is that this element is only going to take the space that it needs for the content that is inside of it. And because there's no content in now, it's going to have no size at all. If we put something in there like hello world, it's going to take exactly the size that is needed for those two words, for the words hello world. So the grid container is going to take the size of its containing element when the grid does not have an explicit width. It's going to take the size that the content needs when you use float or position absolute, or when you use an inline grid, and it's going to take the size that you've specified when you've specified a size. So that's how big your grid container is going to be in its inline direction. Now in the block direction, it seems a bit more straightforward if you work with left to right text. You could have it become the size of the containing element. That's when you use position absolute and a height of 100%. You could have it be the size of the content needs, and that's whenever no of the exceptions apply. So usually it will be the size of the content needs. Or it can be a size that you specified, and that happens when you specified a size. Then let's look at grid tracks now. Grid tracks are basically columns or rows. They are collectively referred to as tracks. We'll mostly be talking about columns here. So if you want to create columns in a grid, you can use the grid template columns property. Then each of the values are separated with a space. Each of them is one column. So in this case, I've created three columns, a 100 pixels one, a 400 pixels one, and another 200 pixels one. So I've created three columns with this declaration. I can also create rows in the same way with the grid template rows, and then a number of sizes. So the most straightforward sizing for grid tracks is fixed sizing. when we use any of the fixed sizing methods. So for instance, we could do something in centimeters, 5, 10, and 5 centimeters. We could use pixels, or we could use a mixture of things like m's and rems and ch units. It doesn't really matter. With fixed sizing, you are going to get the size that you've asked for. And there are a lot of different sizing units that you could use and put into that grid template columns or rows declaration. For instance, relative sizing and absolute sizing. So relative sizing is relative to something, can be relative to the font, like M and Rem are, EX and CH as well, or it could be relative to the viewport, like the viewport width unit and the viewport height unit, VW and VH. And then there's Vmin and Vmax, which refer to whichever part of the viewport is the biggest or the smallest. So Vmin will be a percentage of that part of the viewport that is the smallest, and Vmax will be a percentage of that part of the viewport that is the largest. So if you have something that is in portrait mode, then horizontal will be the smallest and vertical will be the largest. You can also use absolute sizing in centimeters, millimeters, the Q unit, which I'll explain in a minute, inches, pks, points, and pixels, which all come down to pixels, except for pixels. That's weird. Let's look at what the spec says. So a centimeter is actually 96 pixels divided by 2.54. And we'll get into why in a minute. Millimeters are a tenth of that, and the Q is a 40th of that. Then inches, an inch is 2.54 centimeters, and it equals to 96 pixels, hence the definition for centimeters. Then pks are a part of that, and points are a part of that, and then pixels, surprisingly, are also a portion of the inches. So they all kind of interrelate together, and I assume there are good historical reasons for that. They had to pick something, I guess, so that's what they ended up with. Now, in sizing primitives, Vanessa explains in her amazing talk called Defining Auto, fixed sizes are sizes that are independent of layout or content. So all of these that I've laid out here, they're all independent of content or layout. So they're based on fonts, viewports, or absolute things, or each other. Now, if we define some fixed track sizes, like in this case, I've defined a grid that has 3 columns. Each of them is 3 characters, and a CH unit is actually a 0 in the current font. So in this case, I can put 3 zeros in each of the columns, and they're going to be perfectly fit there. And as you can see, the tracks are smaller than the grid itself, so the grid itself goes all the way to the end of the edge of the viewport, but the columns are just going to take up that size for those 3 characters. Now, what if I put something in there that doesn't quite fit, like the word Singapore? It doesn't fit inside that second div because it only has space for 3 characters, and Singapore is much more than that. What will happen then is that the text will kind of go underneath the 3rd column, because the 3rd column is laid out later, so it goes on top, unless you play with Z-index. And that will happen. So the text will kind of go and flow into each other, and that's what will happen if you set a fixed column size. So your column is going to be honored. It is going to be the size that you wanted it to be, but your text is maybe not going to be the way that you wanted it to be, because now you can hardly read the word Singapore. There are different ways you can deal with this. You can use the overflow property in CSS to cut that text off. This may look prettier, but now you can no longer see the word Singapore, so it is less easy to read. Or you could do things like overflow scroll and make at least sure that people can access the text there. So that's what happens with fixed track sizes. Let's look at some other ways you could do your track sizes that might be smarter because they deal better with the content. Fractions that are not auto are ways to use the remaining space in a grid for certain tracks. So in this case, I've defined 3 columns. One is 50M, the last one is 10M, and then the middle one is 1FR, which means 1 fraction of the remaining space. Now, if we do that and we have no content, it's going to look something like this. So we will have 3 kind of equal width columns, which is nice. I cheated a little bit because normally these wouldn't have any height, so I added them in height in my CSS, but this is what it will kind of look like. Until I add some word in there, like the word blijkbaar, which is apparently in Dutch, what you'll see is that it will actually take up much more space than the others. So when you look at that grid definition, you might feel like, oh great, these are 3 columns that look exactly the same or are the same size, because they are all 1FR. But what is happening here is that grid is helping you make all your text available and do the thing you probably want to have. So this is a default feature, because usually you don't want to have text on top of other text. So if there would be those zeros that we had before, then the text Singapore would go right on top, or the word black bar in this case would go on top of the other text, and you usually don't want that. So if you use FR units, it is going to prioritize displaying text to honoring your track sizes. So this is what it says in the spec about that. The distribution of leftover space occurs after all non-flexible track sizing functions have reached their maximum. So there are other sizing definitions that you've given. In our grid we had a column on the left and the right that had some fixed text sizing. So it's going to look at all the other sizes first. So it's going to put the word black bar in there, it's going to make sure that the column is big enough, and then it's going to distribute leftover space. The total of such rows and columns is subtracted from the available space, yielding the leftover space. And the leftover space is then divided among these rows and columns that have an FR unit in proportion to how big their FR unit is. So if you have 1 FR, it's going to get half as much as something that has 2 FR. So the proportions are also respected there. So FR units will take leftover space, but only after all of the other sizing functions have ran. Now, we've got the word black bar there, and we've seen that it's going to make our middle column much bigger than we actually expected it to be. And if you would have a cell right underneath that word, you'll notice that that is also going to be bigger, exactly the same size as the one for the word black bar. And this confuses some people, but it makes all the sense in the world that it isn't like half of that space, because these grid lines that are in between columns and rows, they're marked with 1, 2, 3 here. They go down vertically in one straight line. So basically that pink cell has to be as big as the word black bar, because otherwise that grid line would not go in a straight line. So it would no longer be a grid, so to say. So yeah, it makes sense, but it is a bit confusing sometimes to people. So basically this one word, one cell in a track, can affect the whole track size. It makes sense if you remember that all of these cells are part of the same grid, so they influence each other, and that is a feature, but it can be a bit confusing at times. If you don't want that to happen, so if you don't want your track to prevent overflow, what you could do is use a min-max function with as the max an FR unit and as the min a 0. Basically something like this. So you would have your grid template columns with 50 and 1 FR and then 10 AM. Then the middle one is 1 FR, but if you don't want that one to grow based on the content, what you could do is use a min-max function that has 0 as its minimum. By default, the minimum for a column with FR will be auto. That is why that word black bar actually was able to make our grid much bigger. And if we use 0 there, that kind of behavior will not happen. But you'll have the overflow problem that we saw before, so it depends on what you want really. But you can force this thing to not grow based on one word's content. Then let's look at another way to size tracks. Do it with keywords. And there are a number of keywords available for the most common use cases. One is min content. So if you make all of your template columns min content, they're going to be as small as they can possibly be. And this is based on the words that are inside of the column. If you had to summarize what min content does, it basically takes as the size for this element the size of the biggest word or the biggest bit of content that is inside of that. Now here I've used many very tiny words from the Dutch language, but if I add something really long like minimum temperature, it's going to take that size up because the min content size will be then equal to the size of that word minimum temperaturen, which means minimum temperatures. It's one word in Dutch, and it is very long, 19 letters. So it is going to take up that size and make the whole thing bigger. So if you use min content, it's going to be the size of the biggest word in any cell in your track. In this case, everything that's underneath that will also become that wide. If you use max content, it is going to try and lay out all of the words in one line, all of the content in one line, and then make that the size. So if you put a lot of words in your column, it is going to become very wide. Now, one thing that you can do is use fit content, which does kind of the max content behavior, but with a maximum. So it's max content with a maximum. In this case, I do fit content 50 pixels. So I say, yes, become as big as the content needs, but don't become bigger than 50 pixels. So that is something you can do with fit content. And then we get to auto track sizes. Now, if you have a grid, you can define columns, so you can give one of your columns the auto keyword or multiple. But auto is also what you'll get when you don't size your tracks. So if you don't add any definitions for your track sizes, you'll also get auto-sized tracks. Unless you use grid auto rows or grid auto columns, then those are properties that you can use to override auto as the default size. But if you don't set grid auto rows or grid auto columns, you are going to get auto as the default size for your tracks. So you define a grid, you don't define any sizes, you are going to get the auto track size. Within grid tracks, there's a minimum and a maximum for auto. Let's look at the maximum track size first. Basically, the way that this is decided is looking at all of the grid items that are in that one track. You pick the one with the largest max content. Now that one will be your track size. So if I put the words penny, spaghetti and farfalle into these cells, then clearly spaghetti is the longest word. It's also the longest pasta, by the way. So it is going to take the track size up to the size that word needs. So it's going to be as big as spaghetti. Now, if we put some other word there, like cannelloni, it is going to take the size of that track up to be as big as the word cannelloni. So that is the maximum content size if you're using auto. It will not get bigger than that. It will be as big as the largest max content. And of course, max content looks a bit different in reality because you usually have much more than one word. But you're looking for the largest thing that is in your track and that the track needs to hold. And that will be the biggest your auto row will become. Then the minimum size is the one with the largest minimum size, and that is going to be your track's minimum size. And the largest minimum size is either the min width or the min height value, so whether you're looking at rows or columns, and usually it is a bit like min content, so the minimum that is needed to display the content. So that is going to be the minimum size for an auto track. So it is going to make sure that all of your words fit in. So if you have lots of words and one really long word, it's going to be that size of the long word. It's going to be at least as big as that biggest word, so the minimum size. It is a little bit more complicated. I'm saying you usually like min content. If you look into the spec, it actually explains a couple of exceptions for that as well. So let's look at how big grid tracks can become. Now, grid tracks are going to be the size that you've specified when you've used fixed sizing units, relative ones or absolute ones. So that's the most straightforward. If you've used the fixed sizing unit, then your track is just going to be that size. When it's going to be a bit more than specified, that's usually when there is a long word or another long bit of content that really needs to go in there. And it is going to be perfect when you give the browser some flexibility. So when you're using some keywords, when you're using fractions, or when you use auto, you basically let the browser decide how big something needs to become. And just like with table layout, that can be a clever strategy, because usually you don't know what the content of a web page is going to be, because maybe it will have a CMS or something. So it might make sense to leave the details to the browser and make sure that the browser ensures that all the text is readable and that nothing overflows. And then the last sizing I want to look at is the sizing of grid items. Now, grid items are the things that you place onto onto the grid, and they go into grid cells. Now, grid item size actually depends on alignment, and so alignment is what happens when you have more space than content. And it's basically what happens on this slide. So I have this sentence here, and then underneath I have a bit of space left. So what I could do is some alignment, like I could put it at the bottom, and then the remaining space will go to the top. Or I could put it in the middle, and the remaining space will go both at the top and at the bottom. So alignment is basically what will happen if you have more space than content. Also, it can only happen if you have more space than content. So if you have as much content as space, like I tried to do in this slide, I put so many words on that it takes up all of the available space, then there's nothing to redistribute. So there's nowhere for white space to go. So we would not be able to align this, at least not vertically, because there's no space at the top or the bottom. So yeah, we cannot move this to the top or to the bottom. Even if we tried, it would look no different. Even if we tried, and if a browser would honor those properties for this text, there would be no difference visually. Of course, in this case, there is some inline alignment possible, like I could put it in the center or to the right, because there is some space horizontally. So alignment is what decides the size of grid items. Let's say we have this grid with 4 items in it, and we've put these items in, and we've not set any alignment. Now what will happen if we give a background to these items is that we will see how big the items actually are. Because there's only one word in each of these cells, we don't know if the item is actually as big as the cell or as big as the word. If we set a background to these paragraphs, then we will be able to see how big they become. It looks like this. So with the blue background, we can see that actually these items are all as big as the cell that they are in. And the reason for that is that the default alignment is stretch. So all of the white space is being used. So stretch alignment is basically alignment from top to bottom or from left to right, taking up all the space available in the direction that the grid goes. It's basically using up all of the space that is available. Now, if we use something else than stretch, for instance, we align to the start or we align to the end, what you'll see is that the white space will go underneath or at the top. So if grid items are aligned with anything else than stretch, their size is just what is needed for the text. So in this case, what is needed for for 5, for boxing, or for wizard. You'll notice that their width is still taking up all of the space, but their height is not. Now the same happens when we set a margin bottom to auto. It's also going to use up all that available space. Or if you want to think about it in logical sizing, if we set margin block end, so at the end of the block we want to have auto margin, it's going to do the same. It's going to take up that empty space as a margin. The paragraph is going to give that space back to the cell, so it's not going to be used by the item. The same happens when you put it to the end, so we do align self end, or we do margin top or margin block start, then that space will also be given back to the cell and it will be put before the actual text, and with that the item will be just as much as needed for the text. Now the cells will still be larger, right? So the cell is all of the space, and the item can be all of the space when stretch is used, or it can be less of the space when there's a margin used or some form of alignment. So how big do grid items get? Well, they can become the size of the track, which is a default. That happens when an item is aligned stretch, or when the overall grid uses an alignment stretch for these items. The item can also be as big as it needs to be for the content, and that is what happens when the item is aligned in a way that leaves for white space. So when it's at the start or at the end, and there's some space available, then it's going to be as big as the content needs it to be, or when you use an auto margin, that also gives some white space back to the cell. So 2 takeaways that I hope you can get from it. Grid layout really helps with more international CSS by being less physical. So you are able to write the same CSS for different types of languages and different types of writing modes. And I think that is really cool, and something that designers for print never had. They would have to rethink all of their work. For websites, letting the browser decide flexibly can really make your life a lot easier. So rather than defining all of the different sizes, um, sometimes it might be better to use flexible units like flexible grid columns, so that when a content editor happens to add a really long word, the word is still readable and it's automatically dealt with. Or maybe you want to choose not to do that and override the default settings. So this was my presentation. I have some links here. The links are also on talks.free.nl, which has the slides as well as the resources. Feel free to ask me any questions at any time on @HCV on Twitter. And with that, I want to thank you very much. And hopefully after this, there might still be some time for a Q&A.
Thank you. Thank you, Hida, for that amazing talk. Are you still sharing your screen? Because if not, we can just do the, how do I do a top view for the, there we go. Anyway, whatever.
There's a difference between there and there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, so that was a really great talk, because I think that sizing, especially when we do like Flexbox and Grid, is slightly different from what people are used to. And I think that was a very clear explanation. The examples are great. So I guess nobody's gonna ask questions, so maybe I will ask questions. And so have you used any of the techniques that you talked about, like in production?
Yes and no. I worked on some sites that have some great layouts in them. I think it's a lot harder in reality to convince designers of doing something that's not fixed. So super often I've gone, okay, fine, I will do it in centimeters because whatever you really wanted this to happen. Sometimes I've been able to convince do things like M's and stuff that are a little bit more flexible. But it's pretty hard to rely on values like max content, I think, when like if you have multiple pages that share the same grid, and then there's differences between the grid, designers go crazy. So yeah, in reality, I don't know. I don't think I've used all of the techniques that are here. I hope to inspire people to use more of them. And I think we can use them in less traditional cases, like maybe not on your average corporate website, but maybe on, if you're doing a poster for a supermarket that's going to display on a screen, it might make a lot more sense, or like an application interface or something like that, where you want to embrace that flexibility and use different words.
Yeah. I think you've presented a very realistic view. Cool. Well, my second speaker, Murray, he's
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Wait. I have a question.
Yes.
Amazingly. What I want to know, thank you for the talk. I really enjoyed it. What I want to know is actually, what were we looking at there? Was that a recording? You've done that through YouTube? What did you do?
You have to reveal your secret now.
Yeah, I can type very fast, so and I can think while I type. I can teach you all of this for a small fee. No, it's been a pre-recorded video, so I had it captioned beforehand.
Because actually, everyone was very blown away by the captions.
Yeah, the captions were great, actually. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, because sometimes you miss words or whatever. I mean, especially in a context like Singapore, not everybody is a native English speaker. So it can actually be really good to have the caption. So good move. I don't have captions, I'm sorry.
Well, since Murray asked the question, this is the perfect segue, because Murray is my second speaker, and Murray will also be talking about a very interesting topic. Has to do with graphs. So I will let you take it away if you want to share your screen, Murray.
Yep. Host has disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh, dang it. Hang on. Michael's not there, probably feeding his cat. I have to make you a co-host. How do I do that? Dang it.
Hi, everybody.
Yes, please have a conversation while I figure out technical issues.
So how's everybody coping?
No, not a depressing question.
True.
Coping with the
Okay.
situation.
What are things in Amsterdam with regards to this situation, Heather?
We're all code red now everywhere in the country, but I think people are still happily going about their lives. It's not too strict here, so that's good. Hey Murray, I wondered how did you get into this mathematics stuff?
Well, I've been teaching mathematics for more decades than I'm going to admit to. So yeah, and I've always enjoyed technology. So I ended up marrying the two for the last 20 years or so. So that's my thing.
Super cool. Really excited for the talk.
Tonight's not so much about mathematics. It's more about the CSS behind this thing. But anyway.
Okay, I've given up and I've just opened screen sharing to everyone. So Mari, can you try now?
And we'll have other people sharing.
Yeah, please don't bomb. Hello, friends.
Yeah.
Like, you know, karma's real.
I think that's the one I want. There you go.
Amazing. Okay, hang on. I need to hit the record button. Start recording. I'm going to pin Mari's face. And then, okay, looks great. The recording is go. Anytime, sir. Take it away. Okay, I'm going to mute myself.
Okay. Am I loud enough before I start yakking?
Yes. Hear you perfectly.
Okay, cool. So for those that haven't heard of JSXGraph, which is probably most of you, here's an example of one of the screens. It's good for drawing graphs, obviously, mathematical graphs. And you can also do geometries like circles and squares and triangles and stuff like that. So I was developing in this fair bit 10 years ago, and I'm not doing it so much anymore because it was a bit too slow and clunky. But anyway, the developers of JSXGraph wrote to me a while back and said, we're having a conference and would you give a talk? And I said, yeah, all right. So one of the things that drives me nuts is the number of times I see pages using JSXGraph and they're not mobile friendly. So I suggested that for the talk and they said, yeah, go ahead. And I thought you guys might be interested in it as well. So this can be like 5 minutes or 25 minutes, whatever. So if you're getting sick of it, just let me know. I'll happily stop. Anyway, so why? Well, most of the time, developers use large screen monitors, particularly lecturers when they're developing stuff for students. And often students require laptops to view that content. However, all students walk around with phones, and phone sales have been greater than laptops for the last 4 years at least. And so why not develop for phones as well? So, yeah, as I said, most JSXGraph pages are not responsive. They're not phone friendly. Now, the group I'm talking to is going to be mostly not CSS literate, I gather, because they only ever use JavaScript type solutions. So that's why I'm giving them this talk. So some of this will be simple, some of it gets a bit carried away. So just to give you an idea of how it works, what you do is you create a div like this and give it some ID. Then in JavaScript, you create the board using this sort of syntax, and you say to them, in here you put things like, I want axes, and I want to draw this graph, and I want to do this circle, or whatever it actually is that you want. Now, that div, currently, it's going to have full available width, but no height. And if you try and run this, you're going to get nothing because the thing hasn't got any height. So you have to actually be able to give it some sort of height so that you can see the graph. Now, how do we set the height of an empty div? And I might just add before I go any further here, I'm very happy to hear of other suggestions. These are things that I found that work. You might have other things that you've got to suggest for me that would be better than what I've got. Very happy to hear it. Anyway, our task is to set the height of the empty div and to maintain the width to height ratio. So if we want 2 to 1 or whatever, we want to maintain that ratio when we change the size of the screen or go from portrait to landscape and that kind of thing. Now, typically this is what happens, and actually the developers themselves use this kind of thing. they set up style equals width something and height something. And then, as you can imagine, once we get to do this on a phone, whoops, say on a something about this wide, then it's pretty sucky because you miss out. So either the student has to scroll to the right to see what else is going on, and 90% of the time people don't scroll to the right, they just think that's all there is to see. And it's not very satisfactory. So if you're on a large screen or you move to landscape, it's okay, but portrait, it's a disaster. So this gives you an idea of some of the things you can do. You set up geometric doodads like this and get it to work. So of course, we're not going to do it like that. We're going to do now mobile friendly, and it's not. Wire? No. There we go. I must have done a change. Okay. So what happens now is we maintain this ratio of it's 3 to 1, I believe, no matter what size we do. And it's obviously responsive, whatever. Now, a few things that I want to point out. You'll notice that there's a slight gap after I do a resize before it actually snaps into the right size. That's because I'm doing a delay, so it's not too CPU intensive, and all sorts of bad stuff happens. And also another thing that I'll point out is that we can move around the graph. So sometimes we can, if we need to, we can move around like this. Maybe we've moved this thing over here and we want to see what's going on up here, this kind of thing. So that will be relevant in a minute. Okay, so I go back to my slides. Now we need to allow for the phone height. We need to allow for portrait. We need to allow for horizontal landscape. We need to allow for changeable orientation, resize. Both my wife and my daughter do not have their phone set so that it automatically goes to horizontal. I actually do, because a whole lot of times I'm looking at sites and they're just terrible in a portrait mode. I have to go to horizontal to actually try and cope with the thing. So I do it a fair bit, but what we're trying to allow for is even on load in various screen sizes. Now, another thing that really bugged me is that scrolling can also trigger a resize. And I finally figured out what to do with that. And also we need to allow space around the div for scroll by your finger. As I just pointed out a minute ago, you can actually scroll the graph. So if you actually fill the screen with the graph, then the user is stuck. You can't scroll up or down to get away from the graph. Even if you reload, you're still stuck because you're going to go back to the same place. So probably the only thing you can do is actually close down that tab, open a new tab, and load the page again. So we don't want to be too big while we're doing this. Okay, so what do? Of course, we develop for mobile first, something that most of the developers I see in this area do not do. We don't set the width and height using JavaScript. I'll tell you a story. When I first started doing this, I did a JavaScript solution. I did eventually get it to work, and it was painful. I did that because I know that most of the people running these, doing this development are happy to set it up in JavaScript. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll do that. But it was painful. And I had this little voice in my ear, and it was Hui Jing's voice going, you know, I hate JavaScript. We should do everything in CSS. So I said, all right, okay, we need to do this as a CSS solution. So that's what I'm going to do. So the width is easy. The width of a div is 100%, as we learned in the last talk. And if we want to set some sort of maximum width, we simply wrap our div in a wrapper, and we set the style of the wrapper as maximum width 500 and center it with margin 0 auto or similar. So fair enough. Now for the juice of today's talk, we set the height of the empty div using an intrinsic ratios approach. And when I found this, I thought this was very useful. Setting the height to 0 and a padding bottom of 10%. If we do that, we'll get a div which is, the height is 1/10 the available width. Now I got caught with what I just said. It's 1/10 of the available width. It's not 1/10 of the screen or 1/10 of something that you think it is. It's actually of the available width. So here's an example using that. The height of it is 1/10 of the width of my div. Okay, so what we do on resize, JSXGraph has got a resize container thing, and it looks like this. Essentially, this is the resize container thing. We give it the new width and the new height, so that we set this after we've done a resize. So we get the width and the height using get bounding client rectangle width and height, like this. And a really annoying thing is that JSXGraph, it will actually set the width and the height as a style if you don't have one. So here's my nice little CSS solutions. It goes ahead and puts in a goddamn JavaScript style width and height. So you've got to get rid of that so that the whole method works. When I'm giving this talk tomorrow night to the developers, I'll be a little bit more kind, but a bit more gentle. So summary of what I just said, we unset the current width and height. We get the div width and height, which we set by CSS using those various things that I just showed you. And we change the board dimensions using resize container. So each time we do a resize, we run the following. Now, one of the biggest challenges was actually square case. This was fun. I thought this would be easy, but it actually wasn't that easy. And so I go back to like this. And if I use any kind of phone, maybe using iPhone, like this, they should be exactly the same, of course, if I go side by side. So it's happily allowing for the screen. So what I'm allowing for here is the screen height, as well as the amount of screen width that I've got, and keeping the whole thing square. And I kept thinking this should be fairly easy, but it really was a bit fiddly trying to get that to actually work. One thing I wanted to show you is that this worked for any size. And when Apple Watch is actually available to show HTML, I'm ready. So we can have ridiculously small or ridiculously big. Okay, so we go back to, to the slides. So what I just showed you, I also wrapped it in a div. And so it's like this. The height for the wrapping div is 100 vmin, which the last talk just talked about, and I'm subtracting 3.5 m to allow for the heading that I had on the page. And the inner box is actually I set the width. Now, when I first did this, I thought, okay, I should be able to set the height and width on the outer box, and then do whatever for the inner boxes, but that didn't work. And then the class div square is what I was talking about before, having height of 0 and padding bottom 100% like this. So like this. So vmin is the minimum of browser height and browser width, and that's what I'm making use of. So I talked before about throttling the the resize event. Any kind of change in the, like causing reflows and redraws of the whole screen is actually very CPU intensive. And if you've got other animations and things going on, things slow down big time. So a good way to go is to throttle that off. Here's my resize throttler. I think I've got it here. No, I haven't, sorry. But anyway, we use a resize throttler. I didn't want to get too technical here. And all it does is it just fires the resize event every half a second or so. And then in the resize throttler function, we call this board resize container that I've just talked about. Okay, so let's look at some example pages. This one here comes from my the website that I developed and sold earlier this year. The new owner just puts ads everywhere, and I hate it with a passion. But anyway, here is desktop type view. And when I go to mobile view, we've got our JSXGraph thingy. You'll see a whole pile of errors occur. That's coming from the board itself. It's got an issue which they have subsequently fixed. So this was actually, here's a little bit of mathematics for those of you who want it. I know some of you get turned on, so great. But this is one of the most popular pages actually on the site. So it actually will convert polar to rectangular. It will convert back in the other direction as well. And it will also explain what that means. So if I want to do, say, a radius of 20, I can do that. And an angle of, say, 50 degrees, and then convert it. The graph updates and the values in all of this update. And if that's too painful to put in those as text inputs, you can, ooh, that's the error. That's why all those are complaining. So, like that. Now, the next example, this was actually last night. One of the first presenters last night was actually some lady from China, and she talked about this game of life, which is a cellular automaton, if you've heard of it. And this was her site. And I was looking at it on my phone, and I went to her site while she was talking, and it says, please use your iPad or desktop to browse this website. And I'm thinking, no. So you've seen me do this before. I always think if I can do a better job, well, I try and do it. So I had a go myself. Here is her page, but done so that it is mobile friendly. And so I haven't done the auto resize for this, but I just wanted to show her that it is actually possible to do. If you've never seen this before, it's actually quite interesting. What these things represent is animals or some sort of live creatures, and they evolve over time. And if they are next to, like these two, if they're next to one other one, they're okay. But if they're next to three other creatures, one of them will die because it's too crowded. If they're lonely by themselves out here, they will also die. So over time, we can see what happens to this community. So it's splitting up, and it eventually evolves into, I think it's 4 that end up at the top. So that was the example that we saw last night. Okay, and then my final thing is all the stuff that I just said. I created a page for them. And so here it is with more details of what I just said. And I can show them that indeed it works on even a tiny little iPhone. And the graphs and the stuff all work nicely. Now, I just want to talk about this scrolling issue. On many phones, when you scroll up, there is no URL bar, address bar, but when you scroll down, it appears. Now that actually turns out to be a resize, and that was driving me nuts. My boards were all, each time I'd scroll, the boards would all mess up and resize and fiddle around. Things became unstable. And so what I do now is I actually set up a scrolling, just listen for the scroll event. And if it is scrolling, we don't go through any of the resize events. So it does a resize only if you actually do a resize the page, not scroll like that. So here are some of these same examples. This one actually shows something as well. The original example for this had the slider up the top and the text, the moving text at the bottom. This text, if you can't read it, just says the value of S is 0.66, the value of the slider. And the point that I make is, if you've got sliders and things, you want to make sure that people can actually see what they're supposed to see. So the original was like this. The slider was on top and the text was moving. And of course, when your finger's in the way on a phone, you can't see what's going on. So I try to make that point to them. And these are these various other examples that I just talked about. Here's a hyperbola that you can do. It's quite a neat little application. And then I just invite them to make use of the page if they wish. So basically, that's it from me. The end.
Right. Anyway, just to correct the record, it's not that I don't like JavaScript, so it's just like CSS.
Every session, you say, I like JavaScript, you can do it in CSS.
I said you can, I didn't say you have to.
No. In this case, it made a lot of sense to do it this way.
Yeah, I think the way you did it was
a warm integral.
Would probably be more performant the way you did it.
Yeah.
So that was great. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Wait, where are you giving this talk again? Like, it's an internal thing?
No. Zoom. It's a Zoom one. These guys are Germans. They're from a German university in Bavaria. So there's about 100 people going to this conference.
Wow.
And
okay.
It starts 10 p.m. Singapore time.
Oh, man.
So tonight after this, I've got another Zoom meeting starting at 9, and then at 10 I join the JSXGraph.
Whoa. Well, we're very honored that you chose to share your talk with us first. We are a much better audience. And
anyway, as I said, if there's suggestions, if there's other things that you can think of that would make the square, especially the square one, I probably spent 4 times as long getting that to work. And I thought, why is this taking so long? But anyway.
Cool. You know, and I know that you know that I know that we know that people don't ask questions. So I guess we can leave it at that. And I will just go through the motions of the announcements thing that like nobody, even in live, right? Like nobody bothers to, actually do the, but it's tradition. So that's what I'm going to do. So announcements, none. Please drink more water. It's good for your health, I guess. And what else? So please continue to subscribe to React Knowledgeable's YouTube channel because there's still a lot of good stuff there. Like the more the merrier at this point. And what else? Okay, I've just been informed 2 seconds ago that there will be a community event for React Knowledgeable in due time because nothing is confirmed. But it will happen, just not giving you a date. But it will still happen, so subscribe to the channel. Oh yeah. What else? Oh yeah, okay, there's nothing much to say, so it's time for some useless updates. This is a project that I'm working on with Ga Wei, who is the RK organizer. So that's like Segway link. But anyway, I've lost the elevator pitch because we have since evolved. In one sentence, fluffy animals play musical instruments. There's a website because both of us are web developers. Try to make it fast. Try to do like CSS things. So I'm not gonna tell you what CSS things we do. Please use the new Chrome Dev tools to inspect our website with the new layout panel. Like seriously, like looks like the Firefox one, so like can give it a try. And yes, if you want to give us money, you can give us money. Please give us money if you feel like giving us money. We have a sticker store. Lol. Yeah, okay, actually there's nothing much more to say. So my closing slide is very important in the public service announcement. Wash your hands, don't touch your face, don't touch other people that you don't live with. Ding, 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 ding. Okay, see y'all. Okay, thanks, bye. Okay, everybody can drop off, go and have dinner. Thank you to my speakers. I need to stop the live stream also. Hang on, end stream, end.